Why have your forces destroyed the healthcare in Gaza?
Because they use those medical facilities as military bases.
So all 36 hospitals in Gaza were used by Hamas as military facilities? All of them? Because you bombed all of them.
I ett år har jeg villet utfordre israelske myndigheter og konfrontere dem med kritikken de får for den brutale krigføringen på Gazastripen. Jeg har bedt om intervju med det israelske forsvaret, statsministerens kontor og en rekke ledende maktpersoner og politikere her i Israel. Ingen har sagt ja før nå. Jeg er i Jerusalem for å møte Sharren Haskel.
Mr. Haskel, nice to see you.
Hun er viseutenriksminister i Netanyahus regjering. Vi har mye å snakke om.
Deputy Minister Sharren Haskel, thank you so much for joining us on NRK.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for coming here to Israel.
Thank you. Let's start with your relations with Norway, because your government has been very upset with the Norwegian government, to put it lightly. You've pulled your ambassador from the country. Your government has also denied entry to and any dialogue with the Norwegian foreign minister. Explain to us why you're upset with the Norwegian government and their policies.
Well, I have to say we're quite disappointed from their one-sided approach. It was very clear from the start that they took a side. And I'm even talking straight after the 7th of October. For me personally, also having family members in Norway, it was very visible, the deterioration. And it started with the foreign ministry's recommendation for the king not to send condolences on the 7th of October. This is the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, where rape and violence against women and men was used as a tool of war. And that was one of the most traumatic and most difficult days for us Israelis here. I have to say that it was more than disappointing, that recommendation. It continued along to the point where they declared and recognized a Palestinian state. They literally rewarded a terrorist organization after the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust with a reward. We haven't given up on the Norwegian people. But with this current government and their approach, we've lost trust in them. So they cannot be a mediator when you take a side.
The Norwegian government rejects the notion of awarding Hamas by recognizing Palestine. They say the recognition is actually an anti-Hamas step, which is meant to bolster the moderate factions among the Palestinians who are committed to peaceful coexistence with you, who recognize the right of the State of Israel to exist, particularly the Palestinian authorities. So they reject this notion that they're rewarding Hamas by recognizing Palestine.
Well, it's... I think they need to do a little bit more research in. And not just research, but they need to put their foot on the ground to look on the reality in the eyes. And the reality is that Hamas is the government in Gaza. The terrorist organization is controlling, indoctrinating an entire population in Gaza. And the fact is, and the Norwegian government know that very well, there weren't any elections in the areas of Judea and Samaria for more than 20 years now.
In the West Bank, yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what will happen if there's elections tomorrow? Hamas will go into power. They will be elected in there as well. They know that. They've seen the information. They've seen the polls. So when they speak on a state, who's going to control this state? They are giving it to a terrorist organization. So when you talk to me about a Palestinian state, and I know in our reality how that actually looks like, this is not a conversation we can have right now.
Hamas, no doubt, is your sworn enemy. Explain to our viewers why your prime minister for years signed off on financial aid to the Gaza Strip coming from Qatar. He personally signed off on billions of dollars going into the Gaza Strip. So if Hamas is your sworn enemy and they're using any funds they get, as you claim, to build tunnels, to buy weapons, to hurt your people, why are you sending money to Hamas and their government for years?
So that was part of the conception that was also mainly pushed by the international community, that when you have, somewhat of a hope for prosperity, for a strong economy, that maybe, if there's a strong economy there, then maybe they'll put their weapons down and they'll invest more in their children's future than in the destruction of their children's future and our children's future. But the problem is that you're not dealing with a freedom-loving, democratic nation or even people. These are people who've been indoctrinated by radical Islam, by jihadism. And with that, it's part of an ideology. And so that economical prosperity aspect has no values to a religious, ideological death cult who value death more than it values life.
I came to Israel on the 9th of October, and I've been covering the war ever since. I've met with victims of the atrocities committed on that day, their families. And I remember very well that for the first weeks, Israel received an outpouring of support and global sympathy. It was extremely touching to see how most of the world sympathized with you after the Hamas attacks on October 7th. Fast forward nearly 600 days into this war, Israel is now facing a wave of global condemnation. How did Israel lose all that global support, and why is it being condemned now? What happened?
Strength. When Jews, not only now, but in the past as well, and I can tell you my family's history as well, when Jews are being butchered, massacred, dead Jews are loved Jews, and the world sympathized with them. I made a promise to my grandfather that we will never be victims again. We will never be at the mercy of any ruler or any government. We will forever be able to stand by ourselves independently to protect our children. So when we are capable of strength, of showing that we are capable of defending our children, the world doesn't like strong Jews.
Norway is a very strong supporter of Israel. Historically, they've supported Israel's cause. But even a friendly nation like Norway is critical of your actions, not because you're defending yourself, because most European Western countries say you have a definite right to defend yourself. They're critical because they say you're using disproportionate force, that you're being very heavy-handed against the Palestinians. Look at the pictures coming from Gaza. And your critics say you're committing war crimes. So that's the reason why even your allies have become critical of you, not because you're defending yourself.
When you talk to me about proportionality, I have to say first one thing. A war is an ugly thing. War is death. War is blood. There's victims on both sides. We didn't want a war. Israel never wanted that war. Matter of fact, you go anywhere here in Israel, anyone will tell you, we wish it was the 6th of October. Are there going to be casualties? Of course. We know that. That's why we wanted to avoid it. Are there going to be mistakes? Of course. There's no war without mistakes. Mistakes happen. And we regret it really badly. We're sorry about it. So when you talk to me about proportionality, and there was the worst massacre in your community for years, how do you react to that? Do you fight the terrorist organization who perpetrated that? Do you fight that terrorist organization who declare publicly they'll commit it again whenever they'll have the chance.
Minister Haskel, nobody denies your right to defend yourself and fight Hamas. When I talk about the proportionality which you're being criticized for, you look at the facts on the ground. 80 to 90% of the Gaza Strip lies partially or totally in ruins. There are parts of Gaza that look like a moon landscape. Everything is gone. Power stations, roads, hospitals, schools, apartment blocks, farming land, everything has been targeted in this war. Since October 7th, over 40 times more people have been killed by your forces than were killed on October 7th. That's what your critics point to when they say this is disproportionate use of force. And right now, you're starving the people in Gaza by blocking any aid going into Gaza.
You tell me, how do you fight a terrorist organization who have built an underground city not to give shelter for its people, but to hide behind the people, who's using schools and hospitals as military bases, as storage for weapons and missiles? Do you have a clean way to do it? We said a very simple thing. If Hamas return our hostages back and disarm itself, there won't be any war. Do it now. And you know what they did? They refused. So do we have any other choice than to go and bring back our family members? Children, babies, grandparents, Holocaust survivors who are being held in the dungeons of torture, who are being abused every single day, and not bring them back home?
I live in Beirut, and I saw with my own eyes how you conducted the war with a much mightier enemy, Hezbollah, in Lebanon. You bombed Beirut and southern parts of Lebanon for about 10 weeks, non-stop. And I saw how you conducted that war, and we see the pictures coming from Gaza. In Beirut, Mrs. Haskel, your forces would target a Hezbollah commander in his apartment and only bomb that apartment. I saw it with my own eyes. It would be a 10-story building, and one apartment is taken out. That's the level of precision and intelligence and technology the IDF possesses in their fight against their enemies. Why are you then using 2,000-pound bombs to target a Hamas commander inside the Gaza Strip when you have that level of expertise?
There's a few things here. There's things that we can do and there's things that we can't do.
Why can't you be more specific in your attacks in the Gaza Strip?
First of all, we have been precise with our attacks.
80-90% is ruins, Mrs. Haskel.
Look.
Is that precision?
We are conducting a war against a terrorist organization who have recruited all of the resources, facilities, money into this terrorist organization's capabilities of war. So when you are conducting a war in an urban area,
Beirut is pretty urban. Beirut is pretty urban. Have you seen the apartment blocks? There's barely space between the apartment blocks, but you managed to bomb one block at a time, and you gave warnings to people. Relatively few civilians were killed in the attacks in Beirut, highly crowded areas. But you managed to minimize civilian loss and loss to infrastructure. But in Gaza, we see the opposite. And that's why your critics say you're being heavy-handed.
A couple of things. I want to break it down to a few things. The first one is that the urban area and the use of facilities in Gaza and in Lebanon are different, including the use of governmental facility or are in the hands of Hamas. They are the leadership in Gaza. The second thing, Hamas has specifically and intentionally built the military infrastructure inside civilian infrastructure. Matter of fact, when we started evacuating the north of Gaza to start our operation there to eradicate Hamas, we gave weeks of warnings for civilians to evacuate from there. You know who held them there? Hamas. He shot, hold on, let me finish. Let me finish. I'll show you videos. They're all around.
Hamas is holding civilians back?
Yes, and civilians in Gaza are declaring it publicly, risking their life in declaring it in videos.
What we have seen, Mrs. Haskel, is videos of your forces using Palestinians as human shields. Your forces sending civilians in handcuffs into booby traps buildings.
Look,
video proof that have been verified.
Look, I
so
don't
there's
know,
proof of
I
you
don't know
using
which videos
human shields.
I don't know which videos you're talking
Plenty
about.
of videos, and we'll put it in the interview.
I'd love
Israeli forces strapping a civilian Palestinian on the bonnet of an armored vehicle.
Terrorists
to get
who
out.
they actually arrested to take into custody.
So you strap him to the bonnet of your car to get out of a hostile situation? Why don't put him in the car?
Look, obviously, if you want me to watch any particular video, analyze it, I'll be more than happy to do that. Israel does not intentionally harm civilians.
Mrs. Haskel, your forces have shot civilians with white flags. Your forces have shot children. Your forces even shot your own hostages that managed to escape, waving white flags, speaking Hebrew. They were shot.
You know what happened a couple of days just before that? There were Hamas terrorists with white flags, with arms, who were waving that white flag in front of the same brigade, going in front of them, trying to shoot on them. The fact is that Hamas knows our procedures. They're abusing the Israeli mechanism to defend civilians, to harm our troops. And do mistakes happen? Yes, they happen. But you need to understand that this is a very difficult war in an urban area where Hamas is using a lot of the mechanism that we did to protect civilians against us. And so mistakes happen, and terrible mistakes happen, including those hostages that you talked about.
Let's talk about some of these mistakes that you're talking about in the Gaza Strip. Specifically the attack on healthcare facilities, hospitals, healthcare workers. All of Gaza's hospitals have been attacked by Israeli forces. Currently, 16 out of 36 healthcare facilities are partially operating according to the UN. Why have your forces destroyed the healthcare in Gaza?
Because they use those medical facilities as military bases.
So all 36 hospitals in Gaza were used by Hamas as military facilities? All of them? Because you bombed all of them.
I can give you a list of the hospitals that we've actually targeted.
No, I'm giving you the numbers.
No, you tell me all. Telling me all does not necessarily...
36 hospitals have been bombed by your forces. Are you saying that Hamas used
Can I have the list of the
hospital,
please?
Every single hospital was used by Hamas as a military base?
Okay. Shifa Hospital, yes. We have proof for that, and we've provided it. Nasser Hospital,
what proof was that?
Yes.
Please explain. What proof? You said there was a three-story underground bunker under Shifa.
Videos.
Did you find that three-story underground bunker?
We have images, we have videos, okay? We have intelligence, we have recordings, okay? Matter of fact, to not many, but to few of our allies who wanted to conduct some investigations, Israel gave access to those foreign military personnel to actually look on those materials as well, okay? Some of them were published as well. But I have a list of those hospitals who were used by Hamas as well. And it's mainly because they know that Israel have rules of war, and they abide by the rule of war.
You abide by international law, you have strict rules for your forces. We've seen videos, surveillance videos from hospitals inside the West Bank, where your special forces storm into the hospitals dressed up as civilian Palestinians, dressed up in medical gear, in uniforms, carrying weapons, storming in, finding their target, who was a Palestinian militant, being treated at the hospital, assassinating 3 people in a room, and then leaving. Is that abiding by international law? Sending special forces disguised as medical crew, medical staff, with weapons, killing the people you're after?
Our enemies are vicious.
So you're going to do the same as them?
Hold on. We know what's in front of us, and we know what will happen if we wait silently sometimes for them to attack, like what happened on the 7th of October. Because we didn't act before against Hamas. We should. So the 7th of October would have never happened. When there's an archi-terrorist who would have committed crime and murdered innocent civilian, if I can eliminate him with the least casualties, instead of going into a full confrontation and a war, I think that me and you should prefer the one with less casualties.
You've arrested thousands of Palestinians in the West Bank. You could have arrested the man being treated there. Why do you send special forces into a hospital which is protected by international law and assassinate a patient? You could have arrested him and taken him into custody.
If you want
taken him to court.
as I said,
you're a democracy. But
you're
saying you're justifying the extrajudicial killing of your enemy inside a hospital.
If you
and
want
then
me
you say
to
you're a
look,
democracy.
If you want me to look into a specific case, I'll be more than happy to get the details of that specific case.
And I will provide you with the videos of your forces entering the hospital.
I believe there's videos, okay? I explained to you what's the principles that actually guides us. But if you are really interested in the facts, I'm more than happy to get the information about this specific case and explain to you what was behind it as well.
Good. 1,400 health workers in Gaza have been killed by your forces in the past 18 months. 1,400. That's not single incidents, that's a lot of incidents. Last month, IDF soldiers opened fire and killed 14 health and rescue workers, spraying them with bullets, then burying them with their cars in a mass grave along the road. Have any soldiers been held accountable for the mass killing of 14 health workers inside Gaza?
Our soldiers are working in a very difficult environment. It's a war. It's a very intense war where our enemy is using and abusing a lot of medical facility, disguise themselves in many cases as medical personnel, using...
Like your forces?
Your
forces disguise themselves as doctors.
As I said, I can talk about in details about a specific event.
Mrs. Haskel, in this specific case, and I know you know what I'm talking about, you've seen the videos, your ministry has commented on these things, there's been an investigation by the IDF where you changed your version of the story. First, your foreign minister said the ambulances were moving in a suspicious way without their signal lighting on. Then the video appeared of the ambulances in the middle of the night driving slowly on a dirt road with their emergency lights on, and then firing starts at them. And then your forces bury them in a mass grave. I mean, you say it's not intentional. Why hide what you're doing? If it was a mistake, why not call the UN and say, listen, we made a mistake. We shot at 6 ambulances and a fire truck. Please come and look at what happened here. What your forces did, they killed these people, then they buried them in a mass grave. And it took the UN 7 days to get to the site.
Israel has a robust judicial system. And in our military, we're a democratic state. We have many checks and balances. And there's accountability as well.
So who was held accountable for this mass killing?
Were mistakes being made? Yes. But those soldiers, just before that, were in a full confrontation with Hamas terrorists, just before this case. And so in this case, after it was investigated, people were moved, people were discharged, and I think the investigation is still going on.
So you think it's sufficient? You think it's sufficient that 2 commanders are removed from their positions after 14 innocent health workers are gunned down?
I think that our
system... Because in any other democracy, that soldier would be sent to court, and he would be sentenced, and he would be sent to jail. What you do, you suspend them.
In any case, no matter what I'll provide, it won't satisfy what you would call the international community, the one-sided people who are abusing Israel in the international organizations, who criticize Israel days and night. We have a mechanism. People are being accountable towards these things. We investigate these things in depth. We research it to make sure that those kinds of mistakes won't happen. Are there tragedies? Yes.
Let's talk about the way forward now. Why doesn't Israel have a clear plan on what it wants to do in the Gaza Strip? Because people here in your country are scratching their heads. People internationally are questioning what you're doing. People from your own military, your former head of the IDF, Herzi Halevi, he questioned the post-war plan of your government for the Gaza Strip. What are you up to in the Gaza Strip?
Well, the reality is that it's not just up to Israel, okay? There's many parties who also, other people who need to make those kinds of decisions. Does Israel have any ideas? There's many ideas from the beginning of the war and many propositions by political leadership, think tanks, and many others. Personally, I think some of them are better, some of them are less. But I think there's a consensus, not just here in Israel, but internationally as well. Hamas has to be disarmed, and it cannot continue to control and indoctrinate the Gaza Strip. That has to be the base for any kind of discussion about what's going to happen in the day after in Gaza.
Are you excited about Trump's Riviera plans?
I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad. This could be so magnificent.
Look, I think that what Trump's bring, and it's very important, is thinking outside of the box. Einstein,
your critics would say that's ethnic cleansing.
Einstein said
forcing
that
Palestinians out of the Gaza Strip to build a Riviera is ethnic cleansing.
So a couple of things. This is not what he's suggesting, but I will say Einstein said that repeating the same mistake over and over again is insanity. And so we need to think about something different. And when I hear there's new propositions that are outside of the box, I welcome it, because it actually exercised our thoughts into trying to find something that might bring stability and coexistence.
Your Prime Minister said this week that he will not allow Hamas to exist in the Gaza Strip in any shape or form, and he will not allow the Palestinian Authority to govern the Gaza Strip. That's the officially recognized government of the Palestinian people internationally. So you don't want Hamas, you don't want the PA. How is Gaza going to get governed? 2 million people need leadership. Where is this third party that you are planning for?
So you're telling me that the PA is legitimate. But I told you in the start of our interview that they're not legitimate. When was the last time there were elections in the Palestinian Authority? 20 years ago? Is it legitimate? Or is it a dictatorship? What happens the day after Mahmoud Abbas? If he dies tomorrow, who's going to go into power? Are there going to be elections? And if there's elections, who is going to be elected? Hamas is going to be elected. So you're telling me to give today the Gaza Strip to the Palestinian Authority, and in 5 years, it's going to be Hamas that's controlling it.
So who do you want to govern? I'm asking you a very open question. How does Israel want Gaza to be governed? By which
It's not about what Israel wants.
Well, you're rejecting the two options that are there. So what's the third option?
I reject one bad option, which means Hamas ruling in Gaza again. Unacceptable. Give me another solution. So you know what can be? Thinking outside of the box. What an incredible thing it can be. Bringing other solutions.
So we're back to the Riviera plan.
No. Look, if first of all, if someone wants to immigrate outside of Gaza and maybe find a better life somewhere else, and someone wants to accept them, that's what happened in Afghanistan.
Your forces are bombing Gaza, okay? You've blocked the aid into Gaza. There's barely any electricity. Healthcare is destroyed. Schools are being bombed. And you're pushing the people of Gaza into smaller and smaller areas. Right now, you're controlling about 40% of the Gaza Strip. And then your government talks about voluntary migration. You're forcing them to leave. Gaza's becoming unlivable.
There's a very simple solution to that. Hamas to take down their weapons. That's it. Done. Finished. Behind us. But they don't want to. Okay? We have to fight a terrorist organization. And we need to eliminate this terrorist organization. If I want my children to be able to live here safely and securely, not have the fear of being raped or burned or executed.
In January, there was a ceasefire in place. War stopped for a few weeks. Aid was flowing in. Your hostages were being released. About 45 Israelis were released from Hamas captivity. When you know that negotiations and ceasefires have been the only way you've gotten your hostages out, 150 of them in 2 rounds, through negotiations, why do you then start the war again?
Okay, so it's very interesting how you decided to manipulate and put the things in order. In January, we signed a ceasefire agreement that would last until the beginning of March. The problem is that by March, not the 1st of March, but even 2 weeks, 3 weeks after, Hamas didn't show any signs of real negotiation to discuss in order to go into a second stage.
Because you changed the terms of the deal.
What are we meant to do? Sit like this and hope to God that maybe one day Hamas will be kind enough to release our hostages? No. So we are now setting our operations again so that we can bring our family members back home, so that we can destroy Hamas. This deal is on the table. We don't want a war. Our goal is to make sure that our children can live here in a safe environment. I'm not afraid for my 3 little girls every single second from what had happened on the 7th of October. If we can find a solution to live side by side peacefully with the Palestinian people, this is the first choice that would be for the Israelis as well.
Mrs. Sharren Haskel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.